are here, though, to do buy, sell, or hold for every NBA team at the deadline. We will go a little bit deeper into that, but I think it's a good primer for just what to expect or what these teams should do. Not even, we could talk about what we think they might do, but I approached it, and it sounds like you did the same way, of if I were in charge of this team, this is what they would be doing leading into February 10th.
Yeah, that's how I took it too. And I'll cite some numbers as we go through, just as to get out in front of this. These are only going to be current through what's today, Tuesday, the 25th. So the Mavericks are the first team we're going to hit alphabetically, and they may very well be adding a win over the Warriors tonight or not, but I'm going to pretend like none of those have happened. So if any of these stats are out of date, that's the reason.
Yes, we're recording this while the shorthanded Warriors are playing the Mavericks, and we're on the Western Conference, if you didn't catch that from the title or my long-winded intro, or Grant just saying that now. So let's go to the Dallas Mavericks. Grant, buy, sell, or hold?
They feel like a buyer to me for a handful of reasons. One, they're pretty good, and a lot of that has to do lately with their defense, to me, still sort of inexplicably being very good. I need to read more breakdowns and watch more film on why their defense is good, but they're 27-20. Plus 3.2 net rating, kind of in the mix to mess around for a top 4 playoff seed in the West. There's a lot of season left. It wouldn't be the craziest thing. So that, to me, makes you a buyer kind of by definition if your alternatives are sell or hold. They're over the cap. They're 15-ish million from the tax line. They don't have a lot of great avenues. They have a $10.9 million traded player exception, which I believe came from the Josh Richardson deal. Correct me if I'm wrong. Or don't. They have one of those. And so the reason I think they need to be buyers is just because they're pretty good. They have some salaries that they could package together. They can trade their 25 and 27 firsts. If they remove the protection on that 23 first, they owe the Knicks, which
or they could just first allowable turns into
first allowable. So they have packages they can put together. And the other main thing is with Luka's extension starting next year, the idea of them, going out and signing a third star or a second star, if we can ding Porzingis for like the millionth time, is maybe not that realistic. So it kind of sucks that there doesn't seem to be a huge name available that they could realistically get, but I think they need to be buyers just for all those reasons. They've got the assets, and like if you have Luka and your defense is suddenly good and you're not a buyer, like what's happening?
Yeah, they've gotten a little bit lucky on opponent 3-point shooting, I think, but they've just done a good job of minimizing their mistakes in transition. That's helped them out a ton, making sure you get your rebounds. You're not going to turn the ball over, and especially high clips. So just what Zach Lowe calls it, the low-hanging fruit, is what they seem really good at. And they do have some good defenders, and I think Kristaps is having a much better year on defense than he did last season. I floated the idea that they should be sellers on the last podcast that I recorded, and I don't believe that they would, and I actually will tilt towards buyers. What you laid out, though, and you were right on their Josh Richardson trade exception, by the way.
Yes.
I have trouble envisioning, as you alluded to, what is the best player they can realistically acquire. I do think there's an element of it almost defeats the purpose if you're moving Kristaps Porzingis in that deal. If it's a real megastar, sure, but it's not going to be because that player isn't available. Otherwise, Ben Simmons probably would have been traded for him already. Yeah. And so what is the best player that they can realistically acquire at the deadline? I don't know if they have enough to get Jeremy Grant, Harrison Barnes. Do they have enough to get Eric Gordon? And so I viewed it through the prism of I think they should buy, but given who's available, I think they need to look at it of who's the best player we can get without dealing Kristaps or a first-round pick. Because when you start giving away the distant first-round picks, there's the uncertainty caked in, and then also just makes it harder to strike other deals. And so I'm with you. You have Luka. Your defense is good. I don't know if your offense will ever be good so long as Jason Kidd is your head coach, but you have if you can make an upgrade, and I think Eric Gordon is like a name that's always spraying to mind for this team. That feels realistic, not too expensive. His salary might be whatever. He would just help them a ton. I think they should be buyers. And that's just, that's been borne out pretty clearly with the way that they've played.
Yeah, I think so. And I think just as I was going through this, we don't need to spend too much time on this, but the Jalen Brunson situation for them is really interesting. Because, there's a very good chance that they lose him in free agency because I believe that they are limited to offering him I think I saw it was 4 years for 55.6 million. That's the best they can do, and he's trying to get 80, and he might get that somewhere else. There's not a ton of cap space out there, but you can't trade him because you need this. You need the second playmaker, and really, honestly, I wouldn't be against them looking at trying to go get somebody from a team that's just trying to duck the tax. Like, Portland needs to get under. What can you do for Robert Covington? Even though he's had a down year, maybe he helps. The Dennis Schroeder from the Celtics, who are just a little bit over the tax, that they're probably going to want to get under, get another playmaker, just like small things like that. Because I agree with you, and we're going to mention Jeremy Grant and Harrison Barnes like 10,000 times, and Eric Gordon, nearly that often. But I don't know that they've got the ammo, and I don't know that, like you said, I don't know if I want to be putting firsts out, way down the line, because who knows, for a guy that, like, what's Harrison Barnes on his second tour with the Mavs? He's your third option and like is just solid. I don't know if that's going to do it. So that, yeah, buyers, but like this will come up a lot for the buyers. I don't know what's out there, for sale that you really want to invest in.
With Jalen Brunson, it's interesting. I think that was the max extension they could offer him. So
okay, maybe that was it.
They'll have full bird rights on him. I think you have to keep him because, one,
oh yeah, he's
just too important to what you're doing now. But two, if you're going to move him, he's so cheap. What is he getting you? There will be a team, they'll probably value, because so few teams have cap space. Even if you do have cap space, his hold this summer is nothing. So you can have Jalen Brunson use all your cap space and then re-sign Jalen Brunson. But I still think to them, if they're not going to re-sign him, he would still be more valuable in a sign and trade, even though that hard caps you next year. So I do like Jeremy Grant on this team, given what the report that he fits anyway, but he still wants to have like a semi-prominent role. Dallas feels like it has the offensive pecking order to do so. I don't think, maybe if you dangled 2 firsts, you can get into the race, but I'm not doing that for a player like Jeremy Grant, who you then have to turn around and probably give like either a max extension, or it's probably like 4 years and 90 million at minimum. And if I was actually Dallas, this is where the seller idea came from, is you do have Dorian Finney-Smith entering free agency. What type of value does Maxi Kleber have? Can either one of those guys help you get off of Dwight Powell's deal? He has another year left on his contract. Can it help you get off of Reggie Bullock right now? I was really high on that signing. That hasn't worked out. I'd be looking at those moves as well to maybe just sort of clean up your books a little bit in advance of the summer. Or is there anything you could do to just like turn Tim Hardaway Jr. into a cheaper player? And that's where it feels like there needs to be an organizational cleanse a little bit below KP and Luka and, Brunson in looking at the pecking order. But I recognize that like the situation they're in, you buy, I think they just need to be super selective and opportunistic about it. And before you respond to that, the other thing I'll lob at you, I would have the player most likely to get traded on this team as Dwight Powell, just because of his medium salary. And if they're going to do anything, I could imagine it being on the smaller scale, or he's part of it as a bigger deal, especially if they're including a first round pick, because you probably want to get off of his money next year. But I'd be curious where you land on those 2 points.
Well, as for the most likely player, I think it probably has to be Powell. I mean, Finney-Smith you run into, he's unrestricted. You might lose him for nothing. So there's always maybe motivation to move someone in that situation. But he's like $4 million, I think, or do you know what his salary is? I don't have it.
4 million exactly on the nose.
4 million. So what's that going to get you? And that's at the point, like the guy you're getting back for $4 million ish is not going to be as good as him or as useful in this specific team. And I think Kleber is just more valuable than Powell, and he's your other kind of mid-level ish salary. So if you've got to pick between, for sure, I think Powell's the guy to go. What was part 1 of your question? I focused on the second one.
I guess it wasn't even a question; it was just a point that that they should be looking to see what it would either cost to offload some of these deals that just don't look great, or is it part of a different, like how many of those deals can you sandwich into a buy now play? Because even getting like just looking at Dwight Powell, Reggie Bullock, and Tim Hardaway Jr. right now specifically, those are Reggie Bullock, a non-guaranteed in his 3rd year. So only 1 more year left on that. Only 1 more year left on Dwight Powell. So there's lights at the end of the tunnel, but you also have 3 years left on Tim Hardaway Jr. And so long as he's considered your 3rd or 4th most important scorer on this team, you probably have a little bit of issues. And I do think this team's biggest need is still just like a true multi-level shot creator, where Jalen Brunson is kind of close, but does that translate to the playoffs? And he's not really like this high end off the dribble jump shooter, and
Yeah.
neither is KP. So I'll be interested to see if they do anything. It feels really tough because they do have a lot of deals that can be moved, I think, when you're looking at the money matching capabilities, but the assets that need to be attached to that, they're pretty barren with.
Yeah, I think too that the fact that they're just playing better at this time, I don't know that that should always be a motivating factor, but I think it's a lot easier as a front office to kind of say, we're okay with this how it is. Josh Green might be on the way up. Like, we have ways to improve internally potentially. But yeah, I think there is, to put a bow on it, like there is justification for encouraging them to sell, because that other star, like, might now have to come via Tim Hardaway and whatever else lumped together and some picks, however far you're willing to go out. Like, that might just be the way that it has to happen now.